Oregon Football Report. I am your host, Will Ortner, and we've got a fun show today, but it is kind of a negative show to a degree. We're going to talk about the latest news around Amari Washington and Dillon Thieneman and why they may not be in Eugene next year. Now, I do want to preface this that the bad news around both of them has nothing to do with the Orange Bowl. They will both be playing, and we're going to be okay there. In fact, I'm very excited. Got my Dillon Thieneman and Bryce Betcher t-shirt on right now. Can't wait for tomorrow. Going to be an awesome game. I think the Ducks can come out on top. But with both Washington and Thieneman, they have the option to come back next year to Oregon, but they also have the option to go to the NFL draft, and it sounds like they got their scouting reports back and where they could be drafted. We're going to discuss all of that on today's show. But make sure that you hit that sub button. We are just 20 subscribers away. Yes, 20 from 2,000 subscribers here on the channel. We're the little engine that could. We're growing rapidly as fast as possible. We got Ducks content coming out for you every single day you don't want to miss out on. So when we're talking about Amari Washington, we're talking about Dillon Thieneman. These are two guys that obviously have an extra year of eligibility. There is some pretty good NFL consideration for both of them to take a look at. So right now, both of them got round 2 grades for the NFL draft. So what happened is basically they kind of go through some submission type process. The NFL scouts kind of look at them and they say, hey, based on what we're seeing in your film, we think that you could be a day 2 guy, or, we think that you could be a second round type of cat, maybe a third if it really goes the wrong way for you, maybe a first if it really goes the right way for you. And I think Amari Washington said something that I found pretty funny, so I'm going to take his quote here where it comes from his draft stock. And he says, without seeing my combine or anything else like that, this is still a pretty good grade, but if I throw those things up there, it's going to improve, which that does worry me a bit that Amari Washington's already going, well, hey, dude, you see my 40 time? You see what I do in the vert? You see what I do on the bench press contest? You see how I run the drills for you guys? Like, my draft stock's going to improve. I don't want Amari Washington's draft stock to improve this year. I want Amari Washington to come back. I want him to do the Bear Alexander and say, hey, you know what? I'll be back in Eugene. I want him to do the Poncho and say, I'll be back in Eugene in 2026. Because this was honestly kind of the year before the year is kind of some of what you had heard about this Oregon Duck football team. I think there was a wonder or a little bit of a fear that maybe this Ducks team would not be quite as good as Bo Nix's last year and as good as Dylan Gabriel's year last year, where, the Ducks went undefeated in the regular season. Pretty hard to improve upon that. In fact, you literally can't in the record book. What I will say with Amari Washington is in his first year as being a real starter on the defensive line, the guy's been amazing. He's a game wrecker. He's made a lot of really big moves inside that interior. He's very difficult to block. He's quick. He's strong. A lot of similar qualities that a Derek Harmon really possessed early on in his career. What I do think will be interesting and is fun to talk about when it comes to Amari Washington is his partner in crime, Bear Alexander, has already said that he is going to stay at Oregon. He's coming back. We know it. And Bear's had a pretty darn good year at Oregon. Well, if Bear's going to come back, maybe there is a conversation to be had with Washington, and Washington says, hey, you know what? I'm going to run it back too. A round 2 grade isn't good enough for me. I deserve a round 1 grade. And I think it's also important to mention that who was the person who was at that position before? Well, Derek Harmon. What did Derek Harmon do? Derek Harmon decided to come back and have a final year, right? Derek Harmon could have went into the draft a year earlier, decides not to, comes over to Oregon from Michigan State, if I remember correctly, absolutely balls out and gets himself into the first round. Could Amari Washington do something similar but say, hey, you know what? I had my first year where I was really freaking good, but maybe, just maybe, I'll come back because everyone else is developing and everyone else is coming back. Amari Washington did have this to say on his return to Oregon, and he stated, I feel like we started the year off really young. I feel like will be really developed if we can come back into this next year with everybody. So that leads me to a positive sign of, hey, maybe Amari Washington does want to come back. Maybe Amari Washington does look at this Oregon team and says, hey, you know what? Bear's coming back. Yeah, I can improve my draft stock, but maybe I could do something truly, truly special. And I think Washington coming back or not coming back is all going to hinge on how well this Ducks team does this year. Like if the Ducks, heaven forbid, have a bad showing on Thursday, well, maybe you get some of those guys that have a bad taste in their mouth and say, no, we're going to run it back and let's see what we can do. Now, if the Ducks have a pretty darn good year, I think you could see a lot of those guys take off. So there's kind of my piece on Amari Washington. But before I get into Dillon Thieneman, I do want to ask, will either player return to Oregon in 2026? Yes or no? Let me know down below in the comment section. Do you think both are gone? I hope not. If both are coming back, that'd make me really happy. I think there's a decent chance that one stays, one goes. It's also important to note with Washington that he was put in the first round according to Field Yates' mock draft. Not like a Mel Kiper, Todd McShay type of mock draft or a Dane Brugler mock draft. But it is important to note that someone in the know, someone that is trusted, respected, and has a pretty good understanding of what's going on, he did say that it was possible for Amari Washington to be a first rounder without seeing the combine stuff. So that is important to note. Next, we got to talk about Dillon Thieneman. Great transfer from Purdue. The safety's been a star this year. Again, one of the two CCU members. Super excited to have this shirt. Probably going to rock it tonight over at the Cotton Bowl. I will be there. Boots on the ground, doing a little bit of, let's say research, having a little bit of fun watching Mario Cristobal probably lose to Ohio State. But back to the important things at hand. Dillon Thieneman did have this to say when he was talking about entering into the draft. He said, and I quote, "It's weighing whether to come back and improve my stock and try to get better and develop more, or the bad part of that could be a potential injury. You could be the top safety, but you could end up with the same draft position." Now, that's important to note because he's talking about the safety position, which is very fickle. Like this year, it's pretty obvious. Caleb Downs going to go pretty high in the draft. He's a safety. The kid's a freak. He's been probably the best defensive player in college football for 2 years. Seems pretty fair to say that. Pretty darn good player. There's a reason why people are saying that Ohio State probably has the best offensive player and the best defensive player in the country. Caleb Downs being that best defensive player. What it is important to mention, though, in this is, well, Thieneman could be looking at that and say, well, if I come back to Oregon, now I can be the number one safety because Caleb Downs is going to be the number one safety. Thieneman's really competing for that number 2 spot. Well, if he comes back, well, maybe now he becomes the number 1, and potentially with what he shows on film and on tape, maybe he can bounce up and be a first-round type of a draft pick guy. There's not a lot of teams that need safety. It's not necessarily a high positional value in the National Football League for whatever reason. And so Thieneman might be looking at this and saying, hey, you know what? I'll come back to Oregon, I'll ball out, I'll be the number 1 guy. What's important to kind of notice in what he talked about there is the potential for injury. He's already thinking about what could happen if I do get hurt. How many times have we seen that in in college football going into the National Football League? I mean, Drew Aller's probably a first-round pick last year, and now with how poorly he played and his injury, probably a day 3 guy. Maybe he sneaks into day 2. Garrett Nussmeier, same thing. And I understand that's apples to oranges, but at the same time, it's not that different. I mean, shoot, this kind of happened with Taylor Mays. If you remember way back in the day, the old safety for the USC Trojans, same kind of deal. Hey, going to be one of the top guys. I'm going to come back. We got a special team. Things don't go his way. And then he ends up falling in the NFL draft. So it's not as easy as saying like, hey, you should come back. You have to come back because you'll develop and you'll play even more. You do have to weigh, if you're Dillon Thieneman and Amari Washington, what are the risks and what are the reward? Now, I think it is positive that Dan Lanning was able to keep Bear Alexander. He was able to keep Poncho, 2 guys that could go to the National Football League. Now, I don't know that they were going to be taken as high as Washington or as high as Thieneman, but they were 2 guys that clearly were going to be taken in this NFL draft and could have gone to the National Football League. But they looked and they said, hey, you know what? Even with our DC moving on, even with our OC moving on, we still think this is going to be a very good team, so we're going to come back and stay. I'll be very interested to see if that's what happens with Washington and with Thieneman. Both could return next year. Can the Ducks convince them to stay? Because I'll tell you right now, I think it's very bad news that the NFL is already saying, hey, you guys are going to be day 2 guys, because there's a good chance that both of them move up, not just with their play in the college football playoff, but also with their testing ability, because they are both athletic freaks. I'm going to ask you right now, what is your confidence level that Washington and Thieneman returned to Eugene? Scale it 1 to 100 in the comment section. Let me know. Do you think they both come back? Where's your confidence level? I think that if I had to answer that question right now, 75%. I think I'm 75%. It's really hard to turn down the NFL and the money that can be earned there. It's a little bit easier now because of NIL, but I don't want to say that it's completely leveled the playing field because that would just be a flat out lie. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. We have a watch party tomorrow. We're going to be live half hour before the game here on the Oregon Football Report. Make sure if you're a real Duck fan, you're watching the stream from the Oregon Football Report. We're going to have a lot of fun. There's going to be some beverages. There's going to be some hijinks, hilarity. But most importantly, we're going to be calling the game so that way you can get the full extent of how we call a game, but also the Oregon football team. And hopefully they go on and they take a Orange Bowl victory over those Texas Tech Red Raiders. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and Sko Ducks.